Hey everybody, NG5 here, and welcome to day 24 of the Oktoberfest Hallow streaming live stream bit. And today is going to be kind of an interesting day. I'm going to be doing 4 Creepypasta readings. I'm going to start with Squidward's Suicide, which is a well-known lost episode Creepypasta. Then the Russian Sleep Experiment, a well-known military kind of Creepypasta. And then I'm going to end it on a comical note with A Haunting Most Mario, which is a troll pasta, and Hell's Pasture, which is considered a shit pasta. Hello, Doug. Well, let's get started. If you can hear the background, that's Aftermath by Kevin MacLeod. He does a lot of free use music. So, again, it's Aftermath by Kevin MacLeod. Look that up. But without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting with Squidward's Suicide, and I'm going to be reading each one pretty much word for word. So, if you hear me start to get a little, my voice starts to change a little differently, that's totally, I'm just getting into it. And hello, Galaxy Express 5550. Let me just let some people know that I will be doing a live stream before we begin. And starting tomorrow until the end of Halloween, or until the end of October, I should say. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to get a couple people's attention. So yeah, if I'm not talking at the moment, I'm only just trying to get something out is all. Sorry, I'm just trying to get some stuff out. Again, I'm just trying to find the right people to send a link to is all. Anyway, let's see. Hold on. Again, I'm sorry if I'm not saying anything. I'm just trying to find There we go. Okay, that should do. Yeah, I was gonna do the whole Timothy thing, but I thought, I'll save that for next year. But let's get started here. Okay, let's start with Squidward's Suicide. So if I start, I'm gonna try to get into the narrative spirit. So the 2 people that are watching this, let some people know that I'm gonna be doing this. All right, starting with Squidward's Suicide. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for about a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would shit themselves over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right into it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start the season. But the delay lasted for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. 2 other interns and I were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received a copy of that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up a mock title card. Sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, oftentimes lewd titles such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye Bivalve, when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card Squidward's Suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music plays as normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as he has a concert that night, and he needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The Bubbles splash screen comes up, and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. But this is when things began to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with animation, so yeah, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. And there's a slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could clearly hear malice in it. Squidward's in full frame, and he looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. What's odd is that everyone had hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. Pupils were red, and some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part at this point is there is no sound. Literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there blinking in this silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, or his tentacles, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more. All the while, a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at shots 10 seconds apart, side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists in on itself for a split second and back to normal. The wind through the trees sound slowly gets louder and more severe, as if a storm's brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if it wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes the sound was coming through from the other side. As good as sound the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came in on intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched this show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen, as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied, one eye dangling over his upturned face and popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and his entrails laying beside him. He was lying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. No crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified but pressed on, hoping that this was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing louder than before and half body in frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down the face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you touched it, you'd get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if that were a gale blowing through the forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches. The laughing, a deep baritone, lasted at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single-frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back, but we all were, but he knew he had to. This time, the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was too popped out and popped, naked except for underpants. Her entrails were piled on top of her, above another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street, and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit, and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out, and the show resumed. About 5 seconds later, after the second photo played, the Squidward went silent, as did all sound, like it was when this scene started. He put his tentacles down, and his eyes were now done in hyperrealism, like the others were in the beginning of the episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all, as his sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep voice laughing. And this time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time, the photo was of a boy about the same age, but the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out of the stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor, and the animating and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts, and we saw the kid's eye focus on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within about 15 minutes, and he was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face, for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out, and a deep voice said, "Do it." And we see Squidward's hand a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the wall behind him and his bed, and he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of the episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. And the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry about this. He demanded to know what the hell was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it in my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. Sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of is that the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file did show it was edited over by new material, but the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware, as well as glitches. So the timestamp may have been glitched and showed the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day, and nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child was identified, and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I have something happen, can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things. On to the Russian sleep experiment. Once I'm done, then I'll explain what I think about all this. About each and every one. So, Russian sleep experiment. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas based on let me start that over. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed circuit cameras, so they had only microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. And everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained about being promised, falsely, they would be freed if they submitted to the test and didn't sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was known that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past. And the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones in the one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity, with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but he was only able to produce occasional squeaks. Researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped, and so did the whispering to the microphones. 3 more days passed. The researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from door and lie flat on floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the phones began to object. 3 different voices began begging as if pleading for the life of loved ones to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them in life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chests stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain, allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth, as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed. While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place, the skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs to the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent what they were digesting was their own flesh they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out, and another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped away and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives if you count the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. When the heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point where there was more air in his When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point where there was more air in his vascular system than blood. I think that was a little typo. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even through the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding that wrist as well. It only took a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle not to be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on him. The second survivor had been the first group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of placing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically possible for the patient to be still alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well. Although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation, the surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subject could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: "They must remain awake." All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. Their commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In prep for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip they were going back on the gas. It was obvious at this point all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bottoms with all his might. First left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been first to the wire to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined unexpectedly. Wait, I just lost moment. Oh, there we go. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flatlines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed as the remaining members of the medical research team fled the room. "I won't be locked here with these things, not with you," he screamed at the man strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at any moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out. "So nearly free." So those were the 2. I'll get into the other 2 here in a minute. So Squidward Suicide, let's just review the 2 really good creepypastas. So, Squidward Suicide, definitely one of the best in terms of the lost episode genre of a creepypasta. Somehow when it's traveling from, the record, I wouldn't say record room, but somehow it goes from the editing room to being watched, and somehow in that transition, it turns into this crazy, bootleg of an episode, which is crazy. I love it though. The only knock I have against Squidward Suicide is the hyperrealism. Hyperrealism to me means it has extreme detail, and you can, it just has a lot of detail. And I've never seen that before. It's a little too simplistic, honestly, where it's like, it just ends like that. Obviously, I like the touch where Steven Hillenberg saw it, and he's obviously pissed off. So yeah, there's that bit going. The Russian sleep experiment, that one is really creepy. I won't mince words when I say it. When I was reading that, I was actually feeling like something was watching me behind me, because I have a light on, and the way it was kind of bouncing off my screen, it made it look like a giant eyeball. It really got to me. But it's definitely one of the best creepypastas because it deals with a subconscious. I like how it's like, I don't know. You have to read it to believe it. It's nuts. It's one, again, I would highly recommend reading this. Both Squidward Suicide and the Russian Sleep Experiment. They are legendary creepypastas. But now, I'm going to be changing things up a bit. Because now we're going to get into the silly parts of the creepypastas. These ones are unintentionally funny or intentionally written badly. The first one we're going to do is Haunting Most Mario, and I'm going to end it with Hell's Pasture. So let's get into this, shall we? As you can tell, I went from kind of a serious tone to just having a just having a hilarious time. But let's get into this, shall we? So this is gonna be called A Haunting Most Mario. 1 second here. Alright, so this is also, the music you're hearing in the background is also called Wagon Wheel Electronic. Again, it's by Kevin MacLeod, so let's get into Haunting Most Mario. Once I wanted to play Mario, but I didn't have a Nintendo for it, and I was at a flea market. This old man I saw had Mario and an NES, but the label wasn't there. The man said it was owned by a dead kid named Jim. I just said, whatever, because I was eager to play Mario on my new NES. I plugged it in and everything seemed normal. I played World 1-1, and I did it. Then I tried the old warp pipe trick when I got to the pipes. And instead of the usual text that said, welcome to the warp zone, it said, welcome to the scary hell place. I thought that was weird. I said, whatever, and used the farthest pipe. The intro screen showed the words, Death World 666. The graphics seemed off and sounded like screams happened from the game. It was super scary, but I wasn't scared and kept playing. After a while, I hit a place that was impossible to pass because of spikes, so I had to die. I kept trying until my lives were at 0. I thought it was game over, but Mario came back, and this time it looked like his face was bloody. As I started playing the level, it turned into a hidden cloud level, and it looked like Mario had angel wings. A spooky digital voice came out of Nintendo that sounded like it said, no hope. As I was about to grab a mushroom, the screen went black. I reset the NES, and the game came up. This time the title screen was different, and Mario's face was bloody. It scared me so much, I had to reset it again. As it came on, the digital voice said, you can't run from the funk. The screen was hyper-realistic, and it showed Mario again, only this time his face was me, and my family's face and we were skeletons. It was so realistic. I couldn't believe it. I was compelled to try the game again. This time I started it. As the first Goomba walked towards Mario, Mario turned toward the screen and started screaming, no mas, no mas. It sounded like high-quality CD audio, also blast processing. I screamed and turned off the game. I put it away. Later that week, I noticed my family acting distantly. I decided to research Mario games and found out that Mario was in a secret game that was only released in 2 arcades on Friday the 13th, on June 6th, 1997. This seemed weird, so I started playing video games again. I decided to put in the Mario game again. I loaded up and saw my save file. I clicked it, and Mario said, "Why are you no stop playing my game?" I didn't take his warning and played anyway. I got up to Bowser and I won, but when I got to Peach, there was Toad there instead, and he said, "Peach is dead." Then a ghost face came up, and it had a lady's face, and Princess Peach is a lady. I reset my game for the last time, opened up my save file, and it changed from my name. It said, "Jim died, bro!" Ah! Then my mom walked in, and she screamed. I was dead the whole time, and guess what? My name was Jim! So anyway, I don't know if any of you guys have experienced anything like that. It might have been just a bad dream. And anyway, my mom sold the cartridge at a yard sale, so I don't have it anymore. But you should believe it because it's true. Oh my god, that was beautiful. Oh man. Holy cow. I've never read something as bullshitty as that, but I'll get back to it. Let's go to the other one now, Hell's Pasture. This one's a bit longer, but I'll read it word for word while this music playing in the background. So, Hell's Pasture. It's a Harvest Moon creepypasta, if you're also kind of curious. Okay. Since I was a young boy, I always wanted to own a farm. The lifestyle appealed to me. With a few seeds, you can support yourself and provide sustenance for you and your family. You were close to animals, and generally, you were in a small community. I loved the idea. So at the age of 11, after getting my first GameCube, I ventured to Walmart and took a look in the bargain bin for something to fulfill my fantasy. lo and behold, I found it in the form of Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life. It was the last copy, and I had my last $25, which, as it was just enough. My only real complaint was that the game appeared to have been open slightly, but my dream would somewhat come true. I had my farm in my hands. Eager to start, I sat down to play. Everything started as normal, Takakura narrating while I watched the game unfold. I entered in all the names I had planned since I was little. For the farm, I chose the name North Farm. I chose the pointy-eared dog and named him Kitsune, thinking 1, he resembled a fox, and B, that it could be affectionately shortened to Kit. Hating my own name, I chose to enter Damien as my own name. I started off with some seeds of the cow, a few tools, and dived right into the game. I took great care of my animals as the farm grew, making sure they were all happy and healthy, like I would if they were my own real-life pets. I'd place orders for food and tools and spend whatever time away from the farm either fishing, helping out with the fossil dig, or attempting to woo Celia. I was successful and eventually married. Eventually, I would go on automatic, placing the orders and forgetting about them. So when Takakura showed up one day with a new star cow that I had ordered, I was slightly confused. I couldn't remember ordering another cow, but I took her in happily, wondering if maybe she was a gift or a glitch. Or perhaps it was just another order I forgot I had made. I gave the name Moo Moo, and treated her no other different than the other animals that I had at the time, and she eventually paid for herself. I was receiving the highest quality star milk, and it sold for a small fortune. Eventually, though, I outgrew my childhood fantasy and saved the game for the last time, shutting off the cube and instead putting in hours on a new Xbox 360. The GameCube went unforgotten, collecting dust for years. Eventually, though, I got bored with achievement hoarding and started browsing my old collection. I smiled fondly when I pulled out my old copy of Harvest Moon. Thinking of it, I cleaned off the console as best I could and popped that sucker in. A warning light went off in my head when the title screen appeared. It was the same Forget-Me-Not Village, same logo, same press start screen, but it was the music that got to me first. The music was slow and slightly distorted and clicked every now and then. I thought nothing of it, perhaps it was just my imagination. I pressed start and loaded my old file. Everything seemed as I had left it all those years ago. North Farm, Kitsune, Damien. I played as if nothing was wrong, putting feet in the boxes and doing whatever needed to be done. Second warning light came on when I ventured through the town. It seemed less lively than it used to. It wasn't until after I had played for a while that I realized that it seemed less lively because they were missing. Half the population was gone. I decided to investigate. The few people I talked to gave me disappointed looks or gave no sound. All that read was ellipses, but nothing else. No hint, no clue, nothing. I returned to my farm. Why had all this change come about? I checked my chicken coop, and the sight of it turned my stomach. It was all graphics, yes, but I'll never rid the image from my mind. There was blood on the walls and feathers strewn about. My crops were all dead. I checked my house. My family wasn't there. In the stable and pasture, there were no animals, save for my horse, dog, and my cow, Moo Moo. I didn't get it. What had happened? I paused the game and checked game facts, but nothing like this was written here. I swallowed and unpaused the game. "Welcome back, Damien," came a text box. My heart rate increased as I read that phrase. Who was it that was welcoming me back? I bit my lip and watched the screen, terrified as the speaker was brought to my attention. I was outside my house, my horse Repede beside me, and my dog in front, barking in my defense. Moo Moo slowly walked to me. "Do you like what I've done with the place while you were gone?" In my horror, the camera panned about. My precious North Farm had gone up in flames. What was happening? The game gave me control again. I did the only thing I could think of. I hopped on Repede and rode away, leaving behind my dog. I could hear the sound of a dog whimpering, bone and marrow crunching, and a swallowing noise followed by a happy cow noise. I had no idea where to go. The hotel? Nah, too close. Dig site? I'd be concerned. I'd be cornered. I thought quickly, where can I go where this beast wouldn't find me? I made a beeline for the twins' house. Cows couldn't climb ladders, but unfortunately neither could my horse. So I tearily left Repede to the mercy of the cow and climbed into the house. I could hear the sound of an angry horse and cow fighting, followed by the death cry of my beloved Repede. There was more munching, more of that horrid noise. The screen went dark. Then another text box popped up. Milk me, yes or no. Confused by this, I chose the no option, but the text box appeared again. Milk me, yes or no. This repeated 3 or 4 times, and the game wouldn't proceed until I milked Moo Moo, and I gave in. I checked the milk I received, and I was shocked at what I had. In my inventory were 5 blood milk. The description read, special milk from Moo Moo. It appears thick and red, but full of vitamins, but it sells for 0 gold. I came to you because nobody wanted me. You cared for your animals. I wanted to be loved and cared too. Was that so wrong? Yes or no? My eyes were misting now. It was pitiable. I chose the no option. I was mentally 11 again. You cared for us. You cared for me. I wanted to pay you back. So I made the best milk I ever could. My mouth hung open as I realized what was happening. But you never came back. I got hungry, she said. The screen faded in, and I was outside the house and talking to Moo Moo. I pressed all the buttons in a panic. Reset power. I opened the cover. Nothing happened. And the scene kept going. You abandoned us. Why did you do it? Were we not good enough for you? My heart sank. No, that's not it at all, I sobbed, trying to reconcile for what I had done. I loved you all. You abandoned us. You abandoned me! Moo Moo's eyes glowed a demonic red, and she bellowed, You left us to starve and die. You killed and not me. You're to blame. She screamed, and a high, mournful sound emitted the TV speakers, a sound that hell itself could not replicate. Moo Moo's mouth opened up, revealing all she had devoured, her teeth soaked in blood, feathers sticking to them, cow guts and internal organs all over her tongue, and her most recent victims. My dog's head impaled on her tooth, and my horse with a section of stomach missing, revealing his ribs in a hollow corpse. I looked away for fear. Blech! I'm still hungry, she roared. I gasped as control was handed to me for a brief moment, and I opened the rucksack, quickly choosing my sickle. At the last moment, I tapped the A button, and when it said use, what happened next was a cinematic I wasn't entirely surprised about. Damien raised the sickle, shedding the tears, sliced at Moo Moo, slitting her throat and killing her. I took a moment to gather myself and find out what the sweet holy hell had just happened. A new scene started. I was in Romana's manor, and all the people from the village were there. Celia came and explained to me. We all hid here in Romana's basement. We're so glad you're safe. Moo Moo is she? Damien nodded and looked down sadly. Celia hugged him tight, and Damien returned the hug, and he pulled away smiling. The townsfolk cheered, and all was well. I sighed with relief, releasing the breath I had been holding and chuckling dumbly to myself. It was over. Or so I thought. The game froze! The sound became a mix of white noise and distorted music. Perplexed, I looked at the console and smacked the reset button. The console started fuming like an angry person, and I looked on the screen. Game over in memoriam. I watched hopelessly as the name of my animals and some townsfolk came onto this screen with this victims list. At the last thing, the screen read once again, game over. Underneath was a picture of Damien lying in a pool of blood. A bite taken out of his neck, a foot missing bone, and I'm guessing gristle all over. There was a hole where his heart should have been. Organs were leaking out of a hole in his stomach. I felt I was going to be sick, and then the screen began flashing and it ceased. I woke up in my mother's arms, sobbing hard. She looked at me sternly. What happened? My neck hurt and my arms felt heavy. I looked at my arms and my jaw dropped in terror. Don't forget me, don't forget me, don't forget me was carved in. The words are still scarred on my body. Since then, I have not touched a glass of milk or a letter. I destroyed the disc and burned the pieces and erased my save game. All those hours gone. I wrote this to let you know that nostalgia should just be a memory. But if you must, please, please, for the love of God that all is holy and sacred, erase all your data before starting up again. Because you never know what you have left behind. Oh my god, what did I just read? Ow. I'm laughing so hard my ribs are killing me. Alright, I'm not gonna be a complete asswipe here, but let's just look over A Haunting Most of Mario and Hell's Pasture. Now, obviously, A Haunting Most Mario, I looked it up, or rather reread it, and there's a note at the bottom that actually says, and I'm reading it right now, it says, Note, this was written to be a parody of terrible video game creepypastas. Please note that before making stupid comments. I'm trying to remember who did the Haunting Most Mario. But they obviously did that intentionally. Sometimes troll pastas are just written in this in like a facepalm worthy way where it's just drop dead hilarious. I'm not lying. And Haunting Most Mario does that. And for the heck of it, I'm gonna link you guys a Haunting Most Mario in the live chat. And I was being intentionally over dramatic with a Haunting Most Mario. There are other Mario creepypastas that are actually pretty good, like I Hate You. There's some really good ones though. The Mario franchise. I won't lie, they're really good. You have just Mario, and that's another really good one. But yeah, a Haunting Most Mario was intentionally written to be stupid. And it had all the cliches, hyper-realism, death, saying Death World 666, screaming, hyper-realism in the game, and most of all, blood. If you heard me in the second one, I started yelling blood because that's when you start realizing it's... Okay, so let me put it this way. When I did the Abandoned by Disney creepypasta reading, that one was good because it only used blood as a descriptive term. When Mickey Mouse is pulling his head off and it's so much blood, so much thick, chunky yellow blood. When you say it like that or read it like that, that makes it sound really cool. But then when you throw blood on you, then it looks like something out of Dead Alive, It's it's crazy. And Jonah, let people know that I'm wrapping things up here. But let's move on to Hell's Pasture. But A Haunting Most Mario, definitely intentionally written in a satirical way. It's supposed to make fun of creepypastas. Now then, Hell's Pasture. This one obviously was more well written, if you want to put it that way. But you had the whole it had the whole vibe of Pokemon Dead Channel, where basically you leave a game alone for an X amount of time, you come back to it, and something's changed. In the case of these two, the main character that shows up feels neglected. Like, even though it's a video game, the video game feels neglected by you. And so it comes back with a vengeance when you're, watching it or playing it. And that's exactly what Moo is. Moo was like Brever in Pokemon Dead Channel. Only this time she's like this gigantic cow that's, she wanted to be loved and cared for in the Harvest Moon game that the character got. But once it got neglected, she went on a murderous rampage and wanted to kill everybody. But the thing that was just... I honestly unintentionally also gave Moo this southern drawl at some point. And that just... I had no intention of turning Moo into a hillbilly, but it worked out good. But the dumbest part, and honestly the funniest part was, look at here. The screen flash, and the author sees up. I woke up in my mother's arms, and then he says, my neck hurt, my arms felt heavy. I looked at my arms, and my jaw dropped in terror. Don't forget me, don't forget me, don't forget me. We're carved in. Okay, so that basically means that Moo went to the real world, much like Hollywood and Cool World, and decided to make your life, really bad. I don't know what to think of that. That's, I'm also giving myself a headache, but honestly, it's kind of worth it because it's stupid. But in a way, it's also just really funny. I would honestly read all of them. They're really good. Let me just stop the music real quick because starting tomorrow, I am going to be delving into the original 6 Halloween movies plus the reboot. And I'm going to be using the Movie Clips classic trailers for this particular, what am I going to be looking at tomorrow? And honestly, I'm going to say it right now. Halloween 4 is the worst movie of the bunch. I want to get the worst one out of the way. So, here it is. And yes, this is by Movie Clips Classic Trailers. So this clip obviously belongs to them. I'm just showing you what I'll be looking at tomorrow.
10 years ago, on the night of October 31st, a small Midwestern town fell victim to an escaped killer. Under the cover of darkness, he carried out the most horrifying mass murder on record. 16 people in cold blood. Ever since that night, no one has forgotten his name. And Halloween has never been the same. Now, Michael Myers has come home. He has returned for one more night of unholy terror. Michael!
He's here to kill that little girl and anybody who gets in his way.
Oh, God!
Who's gonna be next?
Halloween 4, the return of Michael Myers.
Maybe nobody knows how to stop it.
So yeah, that's what I'll be looking at tomorrow, and that's honestly the worst one I've ever. Ugh. It's bad. I'll just say that. It is the worst of the Halloween classic movies that I've seen. And no, I will not be touching the Halloween H2O or whatever. I'm not touching that stuff. So yeah, I am not touching those ones or any of those spin-offs, including Rob Zombie. I'm sorry if anyone there likes Rob Zombie. I don't like it. Once again, the clip that I showed was by Movie Clips, Classic Trailers. So I'll just say that disclaimer real quick. Under Fair Use Act of 1976, all clips go to their respective owners. I am only using it for entertainment purposes only. Hey. Anyway, I'm NG5, and yeah, tomorrow I'll be talking about Halloween 4 and why that one is the worst of the bunch. It's almost like it's the Sonic 06 of the Halloween franchise. That's how bad it is. See you tomorrow, and stay healthy.